also my past role, is that this presentation, I've sort of written it for both families, parents and carers, but also as well as for professionals too. Because to keep that sort of positive working partnership, it needs both of us to be able to come together to be able to do that. So I thought I'd start with a little quote. There's always good a little quote to start with. So this is Alfie Cohen. To take children seriously is to value them for who they are right now rather than the adults in the making. And I think that's quite important. I thought his quote was quite timely, because he's actually been described in Time magazine as perhaps America's most outspoken critic of education's fixation on grades and test scores. And I think that's very important as well. So when we are thinking about children, is that there's not one fits all approach, and every child is an individual. And one of the things that I would say, and it's one of the things that I really do try to make sure that I do every single time I meet a new family, and sort of, let that family know that my expectation is not to go in and try and fix their child or young person, because actually their child or young person doesn't need fixed as such. They need support and guidance to access life, and that's what I'm there to do. And that might not always be with that young child or young person themselves. It might actually just be with the parents, because a lot of parents, knowing from previous experiences, is that a lot of parents come to us exhausted. They come to us where they've been asking for help for weeks, months, years, and finally have got somebody. And by that point, the chances are that they're probably in a bit of dire straits. They might have had that. I might have be the 15th professional that they've met. So on that side of things, as I need to take that into account when I'm actually working with the family, as well as where are they now, and where have they been, and also that's really important for your child as well. So the format for today is I'm just going to quickly go through sort of the professionals that you could meet along the way. Again, that list is not exhaustive, because there will be other professionals that you may well meet. And it's along your child's journey of whether it be assessment or support, and whether they have a diagnosis or they don't. Assessment, so just a little bit touching on the new neurodevelopmental assessment service. The support, out there, advice, and a little bit of discussion time as well. So I say GIRFIC, and I know some people are going, oh, here we go, there'll be a few eye rolls there, but at the end of the day, this is the way that I work, and this is the way I know that a majority of my colleagues work as well. And I think it's really important that we all remember that we want all children and young people to live in an equal society that enables them to flourish, to be treated with kindness, dignity, and respect, and to have their rights upheld at all times. So some of the professionals that you could meet, and as I say, it's not an exhaustive list, and some of the people here you may never actually meet. Also, as well as is that because we're talking about Highland wide, is that some of these professionals may not necessarily be in your area. Every single team is different. And has different professionals within that. My team within Inverness, we cover the Inverness and South area, so it sort of covers everything from Bewley right across to Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey. So we cover sort of main Inverness, but we do have a mid team. We do have a west team and a north team, and those teams have different professionals in it. So along your assessment journey or support journey that you have with your child, it could be a hospital paediatrician that you meet, it could be a community paediatrician who obviously is somebody who will be more looking at children with additional support needs, but a hospital paediatrician can work with children with additional support needs as well, but their roles are a little bit different. Speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, and again, your physiotherapist could be somebody that's you know, generic within the hospital, or it could be specialist with additional support needs. You've got your clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, educational psychology, and part of that educational psychology services is the home visiting teacher. Social workers, health visitors, and your school nurses. You will have school nurses who will sometimes attend your school meetings, and again, they can help with quite a number of different things to support your child. But then you could end up with the learning community disability nurse as well, who we have. We actually have two within our team. Three within our team. One of them is based primarily in Drummond School. I'm a community children's worker, so I'm slightly different than a children's services worker, where I work with the families and the children themselves, whereas your children's services worker works primarily with the children and young people, whether that be within school or at home. You have your ADHD advanced practitioners and your ADHD support practitioners, but also as well as if your child is not at school just yet, then you've got your early years practitioner as well. What I would say to you is that Thriving Families have got an amazing little guide, their family pack, which actually gives you a little bit more detail on those professionals that could be involved with your child. And it's evolved and changed over the years, and they've just added their new one to their website. So go along and have a look at that so that you get that, because there's lots of other little bits of advice and information there as well. The NDAS assessment service, I was involved a long time ago when the service was changed originally to having a majority of the assessments at the Pines, and that's now obviously changed again because it wasn't working. The waiting list, unfortunately, again, we're back at it. It's currently sort of 3 years for that assessment. But again, what I would say to you is as a professional and working with families is that I very much look at what the actual needs of the child is rather than just the diagnosis, because that doesn't give me the whole picture. Because every child who has, whether it be a neurodevelopmental condition, neurodevelopmental difficulties, or physical or mental difficulties, is that what I would say to you is that they're all completely different. They're just children. Their needs are different at every single stage. So the NDAS professionals that they have are noted there. And I know that the neurodevelopmental advanced practitioners, clinical psychologists, support practitioners are all in place as it stands at the moment, and they're working towards how that services will look eventually. So they're still within the sort of teething stage of things. But the process for looking for an assessment for your child should really be through your school, through the child's plan process, but also as well as that you can do that on a form which is on the Pines website to request assessment, and then that will be triaged by the Neurodevelopmental Assessment Service hub staff, and if it's accepted, unfortunately the wait is 3 years, but hopefully as the staff, the new staff within those roles take things forward, that they will be able to, you never know, lessen the time that you have to wait for that assessment. But meantime, it should always be a case of that the child's needs should still be supported, and the strategies that are used looked at within the child's plan process or with professionals that are actually working alongside your child. So the support that you actually have out there that you can actually look for, that's what I would say independent. You've got the Just Ask helpline. I actually am on the Just Ask helpline. We're on a rota basis, and I'll talk about that a little bit further on. Thriving Families, as I say, wealth of knowledge there, wealth of experience, but also as well as there's lots of different pockets of support that Thriving Families can give you with their peer support service as well. and their private Facebook page that they have for that. National Autistic Society, I've worked with Alison for a very, very long time, and the amount of information that she has at her fingertips is fantastic. And so she doesn't know the answer. The same with Thriving Families, they'll always look to find that answer for you. Inquire is very much more for your educational needs, but they do have some really useful leaflets as well on self-advocacy too. But also there's the advocacy services. So we have a couple of different advocacy services within Inverness, and the one that I say I would have probably worked closest with was Partners in Advocacy, who have just recently been taken over by Partners in Advocacy, and they were originally Highland Advocacy through Connecting Carers. So I put this on because a colleague of mine had seen it and said, yeah, I can relate to this, and we both found it quite amusing, and I can imagine there'll be a few parents out there at this present moment in time giving a little smile. You know, my face when I go to a specialist for advice about my kid and they suggest the stuff I've tried 26,368 times. But what I would say to you is that every single time you do have a new professional involved is that some of us are coming in completely cold and with not a great deal of information. So we'll talk through that as well. I like these because I think we're talking about children. And one of the things, as I say, is that these two Dr. Seuss quotes to me were very apt for today, because we can't give up on our young people. We do believe in them all, and a person's a person no matter how small, and that's very much that we need to be thinking about that. And as parents, you are the carers who care an awful lot, and you have to fight really hard, and I totally and utterly appreciate that as well. So advice it's a bit of a tricky one, and I think that we will allow quite a bit of time towards the end of the session today to actually look at having those questions, because you do have a lot of questions about that, and the session, you know, we're really looking at some of the teams and the people that might be involved in your child's journey. But how can we create and maintain that positive partnership? And I think that that's definitely something that I would say is it's very much is a partnership, and it needs to be a partnership when you're working together, because at the end of the day, we do have your child or young person at the centre of that. I would say that my advice is not just for families, but I think that this is something as professionals as well that we need to keep in mind too, that when we are working with those families, and when it might well be the 26,000th time that something has been suggested to a family, because they've had changes in staff or changes in support practitioners numerous times throughout the years. They change as your child goes through, you know, nursery, primary school, secondary school, and then onward into the adult world. And you probably have all been there with that number of professionals. What I would say to you is that when you do have somebody new, is to sort of take that big deep breath when they come to visit you. It's very anxiety provoking, I would say, for a majority of our families when they've got somebody new coming in, because they don't know what to expect. They might never have heard of that person's name, or they might have heard of that person's name, but actually they're thinking, well, the other person that I spoke to, and I mentioned that name, because there's lots of forums out there for you to find out who a professional is and what they're like, and thinking, oh, they were a disaster for such and such a person. But that doesn't mean to say that they're going to be a disaster for you. It's always great to be able to sort of try and keep an open mind when you do meet that professional to begin with. And that sometimes can be really hard, especially if you have been screaming from the rooftops for a long, long time, because your child actually copes really well in school. But you're having a lot of the behavioural difficulties at home and nobody's really seeing that, because their ability to be able to mask deserves an award, because actually they're absolutely brilliant at it. Be honest. I think that, again, that's what I always try and do with families, is I'm honest and try and keep open communication with them. And I always say to them, look, if you're not honest with me, I can't help you. So as much as you may well be guarded, and as much as it's really difficult to trust a new person again, is to try and be as honest as you can. I'm not there to trip anybody up. I'm not there to try and find out that they're not doing. I'm very much a case of that when I go in, is that I look at a family holistically. I don't just, I do very much concentrate on what the child that I'm supposed to be working with or it needs, but I also, as well as I'm very open, and I keep that open communication going with the family, because depending on what that family's actually been through to that point, a lot of them are completely and utterly just, they're beyond the point of crisis. And then it can be very difficult to actually look at what is the most important thing. So a new relationship can be difficult, but just, as I say, keep an open mind, be honest, and try and have open communication with that person as much as you can, because as I understand that trust is very difficult. Deciding what's important at that specific time. Again, that's quite a difficult one, or it can be a difficult one. And some of the other things that I'm going to talk about within this slide is that what I would say to you is that sometimes what we think needs to be sorted, or what we think needs to be the support, actually is something that's way down the line, because actually there is one difficulty there that needs to be addressed first of all for a child or young person. And until you actually address that and look at how you support that, actually you're never going to get to that goal that you want. I don't think it's, I would always say to a family, never forget about that goal, because it is something that you will look at later on. Maybe have a book that you can use, especially when you're building up a relationship with a professional. Is that, you know, if something does happen and you think, see, this is what I'm talking about when my child is not coping and this happens, well, actually, by the time you maybe see that professional again or get hold of that professional, might be 3, 4, 5, 2 weeks. And actually you'll have completely forgotten all about it, and you'll think to yourself when you go into that meeting with that person thinking, there was something I wanted to talk to them about, but I can't actually remember what that is. So have a book there just so that you can note those things down, or note down something that your child says to you that you need to share, or an idea that you have, actually thinking, I've watched something on the television and actually I think that would be something that my child quite like. Or you're speaking to another person, another parent, carer, family member, and they suggest, I was speaking to such and such, and actually they're starting to use this sort of thing with their child, and it's really, really helping. Accept the support, and that sometimes again can be really, really difficult for families to be able to do. And I say accept the support, but I think accept the support on your terms as well, because again, depending on where you are, will make a difference on how you can accept that support, and also as well as accepting the support too, dependent on what stage that you're at too. Respect goes both ways, without a shadow of a doubt. I will always respect a family's or a parent, family and parents' views, because they're the ones that are living in the situation. I clock off every single night and I come home to my own family. I'm not living your life, and I have to respect that and keep that at the forefront of my mind when I'm working with you. But also, as well as is for the families, for yourselves, respecting that professional coming in, one, will learn a lot from you. So they may not quite have the understanding of where you're coming from. They may never have come across the difficulty that you have. So as I say, it goes both ways. One of the things is that I would say that this next point says try and follow through. And again, that comes back to being open and honest and having that open communication. When I say try and follow through and challenging something if you feel that it won't work, is that if you are one, don't think that it would work because you've recently just tried it and it hasn't worked. What I would always say is that have that open and honest discussion with that professional that you're working with, and discuss with them why it wouldn't work. What is it that you've already tried? But also, as well as if you are at a place where, do you know what, I just don't have the brain space to be able to do that. Again, be open and honest. And again, if you have that open communication with each other, is that you then can assess that and then decide, okay, actually that isn't going to work, but how about we try this first? So you come to a compromise. A bit like a marriage, really, to be fair, or a partnership is that compromise is always key to that. But even though there are some days that you do get up and you think, I don't know if I can do this today, try and follow through with as much of it as you can, and then be open and honest with your professional when you see them later that week, or have a conversation with them saying, I'm trying my hardest. And again, as a professional, I need to accept and understand that is that there are going to be points where my families are not going to be in a place to be able to do that, but that's actually okay. If I'm there to support you and help you to feel confident, then hopefully trying to follow through on things that will eventually, because a lot of the time with a lot of the children is that unfortunately it becomes harder before it comes easier. And if we can do a little bit of that and keep that continuity, it really, really helps. But also, as well as for the professionals, keeping that continuity with that child is going to help them too. As I say, challenge if you feel strongly that it won't work, but also as well as again, keeping that open mind is that, okay, it didn't work. Well, why didn't it work? And actually discuss that with that professional, because having a conversation with a colleague the other day, she'd been working with a family. She just recently started working with them. It's the first time she'd ever met the family. Child wasn't engaging with any professionals whatsoever, and she asked about social stories. And she said, the mum said, no, they don't work. We've tried them several times over the years, because this child was now a young person. They don't work. They've tried them. It doesn't work. No, it's not going to work. But that professional then questioned, well, why did it not work? Do you have any copies of those social stories that were used? And would you mind if we just try it? And again, it comes back to that slide of, well, we've tried it 26,000 times, but actually when she went and wrote a social story for that young person, she absolutely loves them now, because they were written the way that they needed to be written for her. So while I say challenge, what I would also say is discuss as well. Next, we are all human. We're not going to get things right every single time. That's whether you're a parent or a professional. They don't come with a manual. I've always been great at using that phrase. They don't come with a manual. And what's happened, what's worked one time is not necessarily going to work every single time. But we are all human, and we need to, as a professionals as well as yourselves, is to look at remembering that that professional is human, and sometimes they may not necessarily get back to you when they say they're going to get back to you, or something might happen and they actually can't get those things done that they said they were going to do. But also, as well as is that, you know, you do need to challenge that if it happens time and time and time and time again. Write down your concerns or your worries. As I say, having that book there at the side to be able to actually discuss that, because something that really worried you on Tuesday, and then by the time you've got to Friday, something else has happened, and actually it didn't seem that important now. But actually discussing that and having that written down and talking through with your professionals about that worry or concern that you did actually have is always a great way to talk things through, because the professional might go, do you know what, you're right. That is something that we really need to be addressing, and actually that's something I think we should be addressing now rather than further down the line. And having that talk, that chat. But also, as well as is that when you are starting off a relationship with, for example, it's your first child's plan meeting, I would always recommend that you write down your concerns or worries, because it's amazing how often you end up forgetting something that's really important at a meeting that needs to be addressed. Facilitator, guide and coach. Yeah, that's what you really are doing for your child or young person on a regular basis. Also, as well as that also comes down to, you know, looking at who is facilitating those meetings that you're maybe going to. I would always recommend any meetings that you go to that if you can, take someone with you. Because it's always good to have somebody who can help to sort of coach you through that difficult time too. Because it can be emotional, and it is emotional when you're talking about your child in a meeting or with a professional who's coming to visit you at home, because you don't know who they are, you haven't got to know them. Trust is a massive issue for a lot of families, especially if they do feel that they've been let down. I would also, as well as try and remember to look at the here and now and moving forward, because it is really, really difficult to try and move forward for your child. And again, it comes back to thinking of your child at the centre. And again, I can't expressing that for the professionals as well, is that we need to move forward, because we can't go back, we can't change what's happened in the past. But at the same time, it needs to be acknowledged that, okay, that didn't work, that didn't go well in the past, but we're here to try and move forward now. And I think that's really important. There was something else I was going to say there, and I can't for life me think what it was now. Nope, it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. I'm afraid. So I hope that's some advice that's helped you through there. It's some things that you'll already know. You'll already have been told to work forward with things. But sometimes it gets lost. And it's that great saying of you can't see the woods for the trees. Because you will sometimes be where you feel nothing is going right and you're really struggling as well. That's just some links that I have added in there. Again, you will know most of these. The Just Ask helplines every Tuesday and Thursday. and there are a number of different professionals who sit on that as educational psychologists, clinical psychologists. There are physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and they're usually meant to get back to you within sort of 5 days. What I would say to you if you haven't heard from that professional in 5 days is just phone back and it'll get chased up as well. Thriving Families got a massive amount of information on their website, but also speaking to them and accessing their services will help to support you a lot, but also support, you know, through different sort of groups as well, because actually speaking to sometimes speaking to a family who understand what you're going through can be really, really helpful. National Autistic Society say there's lots of information, and if you can't navigate the website, then I get in contact with Alison and ask her the questions. She'll get the right information for you. As I say, Inquiry have got lots of information there, especially if you are preparing for a meeting with the school, and you do want to be able to talk about the things that are happening at home that they're not necessarily involved in. Remember as well, as I would say, is the child's plan is meant to be a multi-agency document. So it is supposed to be a case of that what happens at home and the difficulties that you have at home are noted down there. Yeah, they might not happen at school, but as I say, a lot of children are really, really adept at masking with that. And they shouldn't have to. As I say, there is advocacy services out there as well that you are able to access to ask for advice, or if you feel that you can't speak up for your child or young person, you need to have that advocate there. They can be your voice, and there's lots of different things that they can actually do as well. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat. And I'm going to hand back over to Nikki and Alison to see if we have got any questions as well. So thank you very much.